Hello everyone, this is the first video I am actually recording, and certainly not the last, in order to share my insights, my perspective on life, and the level of wisdom I have access to. So I am someone who is interested in the deeper aspects of life, the deeper understanding of life, and the mystical aspects of life. So it's multidimensionality, and I always try to apply that understanding to everyday life, and that is what I would like to share with you whenever something triggers my attention. And it's something I was planning to do for quite a while, and at some point there is just something that triggers you into action for whatever reason. And for me this is long overdue, to be very honest with you, but okay, enough with the introductions, and let's dive right into the subject. So this video is going to be rather raw and unedited because I don't have much editing skills, and I don't want to wait until I have actually gathered enough editing skills to deliver a very refined product to you, because that can be just an excuse to postpone action. And you can really postpone action indefinitely by waiting to have enough skills, enough knowledge, enough talents. So one of my mentors encouraged people to take imperfect action, which I find is a very great formula, in fact. So let's dive right into the subject, and that subject is the trailer of a movie called Godzilla, King of Monsters, believe it or not. So it's actually a remake or a reboot of the very first Godzilla movie that was shot in Japan, of course, in the 50s. So I wanted to share my insights with you about the trailer of that movie that I've just discovered, because I find that that trailer is a great example of certain propaganda techniques that have been used against humanity for a very long time. It's really striking, because this is just supposed to be a summer movie, a blockbuster, without any particular kind of subtext or message being delivered. It's supposed to be like pure entertainment, but the trailer really tells another story. So for those of you who might never have heard about Godzilla at all, and I suppose it's not very common, but if you have never heard about Godzilla, Godzilla is that kind of giant mutant lizard that spews what is called atomic fire from its gaping mouth. And as I said, the first Godzilla movie was shot back in the 50s by a Japanese director called Ishiro Honda. And that first movie was actually very much inspired, if you can use the word inspired, by the atomic bombing that Japan had suffered from at the end of World War II. So the trauma of that bombing was still very, very present at the time. And Godzilla is actually, was in that first movie a metaphor for the atomic bombs that had been dropped over Japan. And so that giant monster that was going on a rampage through the archipelago and destroying everything on its passage and leaving a trail of radiation, deadly radiation in its wake, was a very obvious metaphor, of course. And it was a very, shall I say, serious. What I mean by that is dramatic. It was a very dramatic movie. The Godzilla movies that came after this first one, I feel like saying degenerated, devolved, morphed further and further into entertainment until they became really totally ridiculous and just stories about monster battles. One monster being pitched into battle against another monster and team of monsters fighting one another, and with the kind of effects that were available at that time in Japan, it was pretty ridiculous, certainly for a modern viewer eyes. So I discovered Godzilla in the 70s. I was a child. I don't know, I was maybe 8 or 10, who knows. And I saw in a local cinema a movie called King Kong versus Godzilla. And the little kid that I was at the time found that ridiculous monstrosity was the best movie ever. The best movie I had ever seen in my short life. So I was very enthusiastic about it. I believe the title was very self-explanatory. But the thing is, over the years there were so many Godzilla movies that were recorded in Japan, that were made in Japan, and sometimes there were certain attempts to go back to a more dramatic tone and a kind of underlying message. And I know that, for instance, one of the Godzilla movies that I never saw, but I read about it, was a revamping of that mythology where Godzilla was the embodiment of the souls of all the Asian people who had been slaughtered by the Japanese armed forces during World War II. And so they were coming to exert vengeance upon Japan and the Japanese people. So this was, you can interpret that as an attempt to inform, to try to make the Japanese people aware of the fact that the way their army behaved during World War II was anything but exemplary, and that there had been many atrocities in these colonial wars of conquest, where Japan was obviously the aggressor and just wanted to emulate what the European conquerors had done all over the world. So back to modern days Godzilla. Just like the first movie that was ever done, This one is also called, the one I'm going to talk about is also called Godzilla King of Monsters. And we haven't seen that movie because it's not going to be released before next summer. But the first trailer is already available, and I stumbled across that trailer by chance. There is no chance occurrence, of course, today. And there is a very interesting little speech in that trailer. And that's what I want to analyze with you. I'm going to play it right now so you can hear with your own ears what I'm talking about.
Our world is changing. The mass extinction we feared has already begun, and we are the cause. We are the infection.
All right, let's stop here. Did you hear that? We are the infection. So that is one of the most blatant anti-human propaganda you can hear, you can come across, you can get exposed to, I would say. It's far from being an isolated example, but it's so explicit, it's so blatant that you just can't miss it. So what that lady is telling you is that literally you people are an infection. You are either virus or harmful bacteria or maybe fungi. You just pick the kind of infection you are. But that's what you are. That's what you are, because you are the cause of the ongoing mass extinction that is currently happening. So the thing about propaganda, and this is the reason why I wanted to focus on that trailer, is that it has an educational value, really, because it shows you how a certain type of propaganda functions and the ideology that it is trying to disseminate and impose upon the human psyche. And it is just a variation of an ongoing propaganda effort that's been that has been played for actually several millennia now, if you can believe it. The common theme that you find in and under all these variations of that propaganda effort is a very deliberate attempt to diminish humanity, to diminish this planet, Earth, and her humanity, to make it look as small and worthless as possible. As small and worthless as possible. Now, before I focus on this specific variation upon that theme, I want to quote a few other variations that actually have been identified by my good friend George Kavasilas. Amazing person, amazing man. there is the well-known old religious version of it, which is that we are all a bunch of miserable sinners and that we need saving. Then you have the New Age version, that we are here in the bowels of the universe, so to speak, in a disgustingly dense dimension that we need to ascend from by raising our vibration. You have the let's say exopolitical version of it, that this is a prison planet. So it is where the criminals of the universe are dumped into, and you can't get out of here. It's your prison. You have the revived Middle Age representation of flat Earth. So this is a flat plane with a firmament. So it's pretty literally one-dimensional. So it's not very lively, isn't it? It's flat. So you live on flat land, apparently. There is the modern technological version of it, that this is a simulation on a computer. So you are not living beings, actually. Your environment isn't real. It's a simulation. It's a computer simulation. And there is the traditional mystical Eastern version of that, which is that it's all an illusion. It's Maya. So everything you see, everything you experience is just an illusion that you need to free yourself from by raising states of being like nirvana, samsara, whatever. But this experience of life that you're having doesn't have much worth. Doesn't have much worth. So there are probably other variations on that theme, but these are the main ones I'm aware of. And the one that is actually played and exposed in that trailer is it's a kind of ecological. It's a kind of green boots version of it, in which humanity is presented as a plague, basically. A plague, a calamity upon the earth. Like that lady said, the actress, an infection. So something really destructive. Humanity is destructive and destroying its environment. Now, is that a lie? Is that false? Not entirely, of course. There is a great level of truth in what is being said here. But any good propaganda is a clever mix of truth and lies. That's why it is efficient. Because our consciousness can recognize truth. We have these sensors, we have these radars. So we can sense when there is truth in something, and we are drawn to that, we are attracted to these truths. Once you are drawn to that kernel of truth, the clever propaganda ensnares you in a web of lies that surrounds that truth. And in this case, it is telling you that humanity is the guilty party in all of this, in the environmental destruction that is going on, in the pollution, in the poisoning of the ecosystems, in the ruthless pillaging, plundering and raping of the earth, which is a reality, absolutely. The question we have to ask ourselves when we are called an infection is it truly our fault? Are we really the guilty party in all of that? Why have we been doing this? Why have we destroyed our environment, and why do we keep destroying our environment as we are currently doing? Because no one in their right mind would actually do that. And if you look at humanity's history, it wasn't always that way. So the first people of the earth, the original people, wherever you look, Native Americans, Australian Aborigines, people of the Amazonian forest, etc. These people live in harmony with the natural environment, and they revere the planet, they revere nature, and they have a conscious relationship with the natural forces and with the earth, and a very mystical one. So we can't really say that it's in humanity's nature to destroy the environment, to destroy the earth, to desecrate the earth. Not at all. It is rather a matter of ideology, it would seem, because it's only with the advent of certain ideologies that we have started to act in ways that have proved to be very nefarious to the environment. Certain ideologies and perceptions of the world and belief systems about the world. And where did these belief systems come from? Is a question we should ask. Did they really come from humanity? How did we come to adopt them? Was it really a result of the natural historic evolution of humankind? I think not. I really don't think so. So I am not trying to exonerate us from our responsibility. We have responsibility. So we are the dominant species on this planet, and so we have the absolute responsibility of the way we manage our relationship with her. I don't deny that at all. What I want to express, what I want to articulate, is that there is ample evidence that we have been manipulated in the very limited state of consciousness we are currently operating from. And it is that very limited state of consciousness that actually prevents us from interacting with the earth in a mature, responsible, and respectful way. Why am I saying that? Because there is again ample evidence, all kinds of records and testimonials available. You just have, in this day and age of the internet, you just have to do your research when you become aware of these themes, and you are going to discover all of that information. the state of consciousness we are currently operating from is a very diminished one compared to the true potential and the true abilities that Earth humans have. So why are we currently in that diminished state with these limited capacities? And why do I say that these limited capacities are the cause of our destructive way of interacting with the natural environment? Well, because our perspective is currently so limited that we have trouble perceiving the consequences of our actions. We don't see the global picture. So the more narrow our perspective is, the more one-dimensional it is, the less we can be aware of the consequences of our action, the long-term consequences, the global consequences on society, on people across the globe, on the planet herself. We only see what is right in front of us, in fact. So it's that very limited perspective, and also the fact that most of the time most of us are limited to a perception through the 5 physical senses. We only perceive the material environment. So we are not aware of everything that's going on in the more subtle levels of life. So we are not aware that there are beings in more subtle vibratory levels of life that are affected by what we do, nor that our planet herself is a sentient being. So why are we finding ourselves in such a limited state of awareness and ability? My contention is that we have been tampered with, very heavily so, by beings, and again, you just have to do your research in this day and age, but being from other dimensions and other regions of space, so aliens, basically extraterrestrials. And why would they do so? Why would they do that? And I'm not going to delve too deeply into these subjects that many of you are already aware of anyway, but there are many groups of extraterrestrial and interdimensional beings who believe it is in their interest to control the Earth and to control her humanity. So they are actually very concerned about our potential and about the true scope of our abilities and the true power that is inherent to this physical vehicle that we have, which is totally unique in this universe, because it's the only physical body that is connected intimately, organically connected to the entirety of the universe. It's the only one that is a fractal of the universe. So understand that each of your cells is connected with a galaxy, that each of your atoms is connected with a star system somewhere in this universe, and that this makes you an immensely powerful being. You're just not aware of it, because your awareness of it has been deliberately obscured through genetic manipulation, through etheric manipulation, through chemical manipulation, by all the toxins that were released into our food chain, our air, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, everything. They came at us from every possible angle. The technology as well, the mind control grids that are in place. So, do I mean by that we are victims and that we have no responsibility whatsoever in that situation? No, absolutely not. That is not what I mean. Among other things, because at a certain level we have agreed to this situation. Not at an ego level, of course, because nobody in their right mind at the ego level would agree to such an extreme situation of crippling enslavement. But at a higher level of our multidimensional being, we have decided as a species that we wanted to go through that period of obscurity and extreme limitation in order to, in fact, overcome it. Because in the process of overcoming it, there is an alchemy involved, a very potent alchemy that is already propelling us to the next stage of our evolution. That is a version of life that this universe had never seen before. And it has very, very deep and very powerful universal repercussions. So on the Earth stage, we are at the cutting edge of universal evolution, and that is why there is such an intense battle for the control of human consciousness. And in order for us to stay in a very limited, narrow state of consciousness, among other things, we have to be fed the idea constantly that we are small, that we are worthless, that we are destructive, that we are really, really limited beings. So guilt, of course, is very often used as a weapon against us, and it's very evident here. You know, you are the ones who are destroying the earth. You are the one who are destroying the environment. Well, yes, that's true. But we are doing it first because our consciousness has been deliberately tampered with and obscured and diminished. And second, because we have been prevented from accessing the technologies that would have enabled us to live in much greater harmony with our environment. Maybe not complete harmony, but in a much, much more respectful way. So it's been over a century now that human inventors, you know, people from that infection species, according to what we hear in that trailer, have come up with all kinds of technologies that would have made the petrochemical industry useless, that would have made nuclear power plants totally irrelevant, that would have given us access to clean ways of operating our industries, and much more empowering ways to, for instance, generate electricity, unlimited access to electricity to everyone, totally decentralized, etc., etc. But everything that could be empowering to the individual and to the communities has been systematically suppressed, again in a very deliberate way, by the powers that be, by the elites who have kept themselves in power at the expense of the common people. And these elites are, at least the people who are sitting at the top of that very unnatural pyramid of power, these people are part of bloodlines. And if you look deeply enough, you will discover that they are so keen on maintaining the quote-unquote purity of their bloodline, because they have a certain amount of non-human genes in their genetic makeup. So in other terms, they are descendants of human ET hybrids, which is why they consider themselves as superior to the rest of humanity, because they were actually supposed to work as middlemen for the extraterrestrials that have been pulling the strings behind the scenes. So we actually find very interesting references to that in that trailer. So I'm going to play the next little bit of the trailer, and we have some pretty interesting allusions, innuendos to that aspect of the situation we are dealing with.
But like all living organisms, the Earth unleashed a fever to fight this infection. Its original and rightful rulers, the Titans.
All right, the Titans. So, again, what we have here is an interesting mix of truth and lies. So, the Earth is referenced to here as a living organism. And I quite agree with that statement. Yes, absolutely, the Earth is a living organism. And again, it's not a novelty, you know. It's there is no extraordinary discovery in that statement. Again, the original people were quite aware of that, and in ancient myth, it's a notion that is omnipresent. In modern days, James Lovelock has the one who has come up with what he called the Gaia hypothesis, from the name of the ancient Greek deity, the earth goddess Gaia. Of course, James Lovelock had to adopt the ways of the scientific framework and scientific mindset and present that as a hypothesis, because that's what you're supposed to do when you're following the scientific method. And of course, he got a lot of pushback and blowback for formulating that hypothesis. But this is a very limited way of presenting the reality of what Earth actually is, because yes, she is a living organism, even though even that is disputed by the worshippers of the paradigm of extreme limitation. But beyond the purely biological aspect of life, the biological aspect of her being, she's not only a living organism, she's also a sentient being. And her sentience goes far, far, far beyond what most people actually understand and imagine, because she actually is an extraordinary, an amazing, a wonderful, multidimensional conscious being of unimaginable majesty and splendor. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just cultivate your relationship with the earth and with her consciousness, and she will reveal these aspects to you as you spend time to feel into that and to experience it. But what I wanted to say here is that you have here that story that is fed to you, that the organism of the earth is unleashing a fever to get rid of you very vile infection. And what is that fever? So no reference, of course, to the amazing sentience, multidimensional sentience of the earth. Here is just an organism, not a loving, compassionate, divine mother who deeply cares about her children, just an organism that wants to get rid of an infection. How is that organism going to do that? By unleashing a fever. And what is that fever? What the lady told you, it's the original and rightful rulers of the earth, the Titans. So what we are hearing here, we are hearing a few things. First, what we hear is that the earth has rulers, which is very typical of a certain mindset. Why would the earth need rulers at all? Is she not able to take care of herself? Because that's the idea there is there behind the ideology of rulership. You know, you people can't take care of yourselves. You need a ruler. You need a ruler to manage things for you, to manage society and preventing from plunging into the depth of anarchy. Well, I believe anarchy is a good thing, actually, but there is again that ideological twist, that confusion that is deliberately fed to people, that anarchy equals barbarism, equals savagery, equals the rule of the rule of violence, the rule of the barbarians, and nothing could be further from the truth. The actual rule of the barbarians is empires and kingdoms and superstates. That is the rule of barbarians, as we have consistently seen throughout history. Could it be more evident? I mean, who is unleashing wars? Who is declaring wars? And it's not anarchistic people, you know, who launched 2 world wars. Absolutely not. It was very structured state empires. So rulers, yeah. So the Earth needs rulers apparently, and she has original and legitimate rulers, meaning that the current infection that is plaguing the Earth, that vile humankind, isn't the original ruler, nor the legitimate ruler. So who is that? The Titans. And who are these Titans? Well, in the movie they're gigantic monsters, apparently. So you need to have a look at these beings, because the ones that are present in that movie, as far as I know, since it is a remake of one of the Godzilla movies, which okay, cars passing by, sorry about that. That movie was Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, and in that very silly movie you had 3 other monsters, Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan, teaming up against the space monster Ghidorah. So apparently, from what I can tell, these are the ones we're going to see in that movie as well. And they are the Titans, so they are the original and legitimate owners. What this refers to is to extraterrestrials, in fact, who were supposedly here before us. So, and it's actually true that you have many of these groups, and especially a few of them, that have been have played a very prominent role in our recent history, that claim ownership of the Earth and of her humanity, by the way. So they consider themselves, or at least they claim to be, the rightful owners of this planet, and of you, by the way. Some of them are working really hard to make us believe that they were our creators, and that we were created for very unglorious reasons, to mine gold, basically, because it wasn't worthy of them. So they engineered us to mine gold for them, which is total baloney, by the way. But that's one of the many examples of these strategies of cosmic propaganda, of exopolitical propaganda. So legitimate, original and legitimate rulers of the Earth. Look at them. Look at them. 3 of them. So you have, Mothra is actually a giant moth. It's a gigantic moth. So here we have an insectoid. The 3 other ones have a reptilian aspect, a very pronounced reptilian aspect. And maybe the most prominent group that's been involved over the last millennia in pulling strings behind the scenes to control humanity, the Earth humanity, have been the Alpha Draconis reptilians. And again, that's something you can research, and you'll find a lot of information about that readily available, and testimonials of people who have had interactions with these beings. Draconians. We can never make general statements about any species, because that's actually racism. So we can't make blanket statements about all draconians. But the draconian groups that we have been dealing with here are very arrogant ones and very aggressive, conquering, manipulative groups. So it seems that there were also much more benevolent draconians that were involved in the gigantic endeavor to create the human template, the human biological template as a fractal of the universe. So many races contributed to that effort, which is why it's absolute bullshit when one extraterrestrial race claims to be the creator of Earth humankind. It's just preposterous. It's absolutely false, because there were numerous races, extraterrestrial and interdimensional, who were involved in that project. But among these were a group of draconian geneticists. So you can't say that all draconians are evil conquerors. It's not true. And even though the draconian civilization that we've had and still have problems with is a very aggressive one and very hierarchical one and very arrogant one, we can't say that all draconians are like that. But very interesting that in that trailer we have that reference to original legitimate rulers that have a reptilian aspect, and again that is destined to ingrain that concept, that idea in you that you are really inferior, worthless, unworthy creatures, and that they are titans, beings that are so much powerful and so much more ancient than you are, that you actually should pay allegiance to, because they can destroy you. They can destroy you if you don't behave, and they're about to do so. So you should really tremble in your boots and be ready to bow before them. And again, that is actually totally contrary to the truth, because they only seem to be so much more powerful than you are. And these draconians have very strong mental abilities, so they are a very strong telepathic race. They can probe people's minds and mind control people, impose their will through mind control. But again, that's only because humans have been so diminished, because a human being in its awakened state is totally impervious to what anything these guys can do, really, absolutely anything. And that is why, in fact, they are putting so much effort in maintaining that state of crippled limitation, and to maintain that mindset of subservience into the masses, because they are actually terrified that we might wake up and that we might claim what is actually our true status and state of being. Because not only would they lose the advantages they have in controlling the Earth, but it would be a terrible blow to their ideology that they are the best of the best, that they are the supreme beings of the universe, which again is pretty ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous, because they're very far from being that. But it's what they want to believe. It's the belief systems they've been raised with, and that their culture has perpetuated for thousands of generations, because they are an ancient race. They are much more ancient than we are as a race. So it doesn't mean that they are ancient souls. So you can have a young race that is inhabited by souls that are much more ancient than the souls who will typically inhabit the bodies of an ancient race. Not the same thing at all. Alright, so I think I'm going to stop here, because I said everything I wanted to say about that trailer. Movies and TV shows as well, fiction, is used a lot to disseminate propaganda. It's propagating valuable information as well in coded form. We must develop the ability to discern between the two, to decrypt what is actual information, which is often proposed in a coded or symbolic way, but also sometimes in a very direct and explicit way, from what is actually programs, ideological programs of mind control, like we have just seen in that trailer. All right, so it's almost been an hour now. It's much longer than I expected, and I'm not sure you will you will stay with me for such an extended period of time. But it was fun. It was fun for me for a first delivery in video format, and well, I certainly enjoyed myself sharing my insights with you, and I hope you enjoyed that too. And well, I'll be back maybe very soon to share my perspective with you again. All right, so all the best to all of you, and talk to you soon.